We're live.
Yo,
Welcome back to the motherfucking Ghost Show. Welcome back to the motherfucking Ghost Show, bish. We back in this bitch and nobody gonna tell us what to do. That's what's up. We back in this bitch and nobody gonna tell us what to do.
Welcome, friends and families. This podcast is brought to you by White
Kratom.
Borneo Cranium.
Cranium.
Yeah.
Cranadium. It's the best. It's kratom mixed with baby brains.
I joke a lot about Kratom, but if I'm being totally honest, it's a beautiful drug. It is a drug, obviously, but it's legal and it's like
Kind of like heroin, but not as fun.
It's a very peaceful. It's kind of like marijuana. It's very peaceful.
Well, it's even more peaceful than marijuana because it makes scary-wana.
Yeah, you can
less
use
scary-wana.
it to, yeah,
You know?
you can use it to make marijuana less scary. That's true.
No wanna scarawana. That's what I say.
That's right.
And that's what kratom stands for.
That's actually the name of my
Shouldn't chew gum on them.
my future marijuana cultivation company. It's called Scarawana. What's up, Ghost fam? How's everyone doing?
Welcome back to the
Oh yeah.
Woo! I love what's his name? Tommy Johns?
Who?
Tommy Johns from Your Mom's House, the guy who's like, woo!
I don't know.
I just got out of prison and I found out I'm gay.
Oh,
Woo!
shit,
That
yeah,
guy's
yeah.
so funny, bro. And
I
sad.
got a DUI, baby.
Woo!
Yeah, what's one of the other fucking lines?
Note
he
to
says?
self: don't swallow fucking 8 kratom pills at one time.
Why is that?
It's just take it easy. Do like at least 4. Split it up. Don't put them all in your mouth and try to fucking swallow them.
Oh, I'm already like 11 deep.
No. Take as many as you want. Just don't put them all in your mouth at the same
one
time.
Fair
Yeah, I don't
enough.
know why I did that. I was like, I thought I'm gonna die. Woo, baby! I'm in the afterlife, baby. Smoking on that kratom.
Yeah, dude, it's like the first video he does is like,
Hitting on
y'all
chicks.
be safe out there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's what it is. Make sure you take your Uvas. He says it with a V.
Uvas.
And then literally like the next day, he's like, I just got a DUI, baby.
I just
Like,
got
the
a
next
DUI,
fucking day.
baby. It's the 4th of July, baby. Make sure you take your Ubers. Make sure you be safe. So he said, I just got a DUI, baby. Woo! I just went to prison, baby. Woo! I just got out of prison. I found out I'm
And
gay.
he just has like
Woo!
the fucking most pretty teeth ever.
Not when he was in prison, bro.
Oh yeah, he
Because
goes
there was
through,
like an
a
addicted to
phase.
meth era where he just
Yeah.
lost everything, and they're like, "Oh no, what is going on?"
And then he kind of like recovers, but you can tell like he's got like worn out. Like,
there's some
complexion.
damage that there's some scars from
Yeah.
that time doing the meth.
It's like how I'll probably never have a good looking body because I was so fat for so long. Like,
That's not true.
like well, it's just like it's
I forget
not
that you were
impossible.
fat.
It's not impossible,
You're so skinny now.
but like, I don't know. It's probably mostly alcohol. Oh, there's a joint right here too. Have a lighter right here. Got a lighter, mate.
Yeah, Death Vibe Records.
Death Vibe?
Death Vibe.
Yeah.
It's the new thing.
Death Vibe?
I made it up right now. It's on the spot. Coming at you live from Death Vibe Records. Coming at you live from Death Vibe Records.
Death Vibe, what is Death Vibe?
Death Vibe.
Death
Death
Vibe
Vibe.
Records.
Yeah.
Podcast.
Death Vibe.
Should I speed this up?
Fucking light it up. Let's get that fucking bitch going. Sure to fucking. Oh yeah, I'm trying to do this actually professionally a little bit. I've been like thinking about the other podcast where it's literally just like 8 minutes of us making sounds that they'll hate, and that's okay. There's times and place for that, but I want this. I'm trying to make this more interesting, a little more professional, just so it's tolerable. Where like if I put it out, I'll be like, that was a good episode, instead of being like, now we just kind of sat around and half-assed the podcast.
Yeah.
Because there's a good or not. I think there's a I think there's a difference between putting effort into a podcast to make it artful and then just doing it to get it done with.
I think
And I want to make it artful.
Professionalism is not, in my head, is not the right thing. I think
that's why I went with artful.
Focus and like everybody's on the same page, because a lot of times like
Derails into
it
nothing.
gets derailed and nobody's on the same page, and a lot
It's
of
a
times
show, you
it's
know?
like people are on their
Yeah, I don't
phone
like this bitch.
or like they're just like they're not totally in it. And I want to like I think that's the thing that makes it boring. When you're totally in it,
It gets super interesting.
it's super interesting, because it's super interesting to like the conversation becomes interesting.
There's a thickie, bro.
I know. I
It's
haven't rolled a
thicky
joint in a
bitch,
long
bro.
time.
This bitch said, "Come
No,
on,
I
bro.
think,
Slap
yeah,
these
like-
cheeks."
Professionalism comes with passion. I think like professionalism comes with a passion for the thing you're doing. If you really want something to be good and to be like at least successful in your own head, you're gonna exercise like a certain amount of professionalism.
Yeah.
Unless you're just like I don't know, delusional or like off the rails or something. But like any amount of any like creation
I'll say
takes
this: the professionalism comes in doing the act, being consistent with it and putting it out. Not marketing, but like I edited the show. I made it where it's a show, regardless of what took place, and you put it up for people. You package it for the viewer. You say, "Here's a little gift. Take this." And I think that's the professionalism. And then the art is the act of doing it, the act of packaging it. The professionalism comes in the discipline, you know? Speaking of discipline, I've been really rolling around this idea in my head, and it's kind of becoming more and more profound as I think about it.
And what's that?
Faith is something that I think people need to reevaluate and understand in a different way. I think we've really lost the meaning of faith because it's been so overly associated with religious ideas and context and used to justify horrible things.
In the name.
It's sort of like a miscarriage of faith, right?
In the
it's
name
not
of
good.
the Lord, I shall slay thee.
That's okay. That's different. That's like sounds like you had to do it. Like they were gonna, you know what I mean? Unless it was like the Crusades where they're like, we don't care what you're doing, we're just gonna kill you because we believe in the Lord. Like, wait a minute, who is this Lord? He's an all-powerful being that tells us to be good to people.
Yeah, I mean, like, I just dedicated a murder to, like, a potentially non-existent entity. It's pretty much the same thing, right?
Yeah.
I
But
agree. I think that's something I think about constantly. Like,
how much religious
essentially, every time the idea of faith pops up in my head, I go through this, like, inner dialogue where I have to, like, separate it consciously from religion. Like, I have to
Yeah.
take a minute and explain to myself why faith has nothing to do with religion.
No.
At least, like, in terms of, like, what faith is at its core.
To me, faith is like this internal safety net for your psyche, almost sort of like a propeller as well. It acts in both capacities that helps you steer and stay directed towards your ideals and your highest ideals at that.
Yeah, I guess it sort of implies that you have some sort of morale or like.
Well, I don't think faith can exist in a useful way without it being something that you're steering yourself towards, right? It has to be something that's aligned with an ideal, not necessarily a morality,
right? I think,
but like something to accomplish, something to become, and then that thing that you're becoming, the becoming you could call it, is where you derive your morality. So the morality, I think, is second.
It's your God, basically.
Well, yeah, and your God is sort of yourself. Because we are God in the subjective experience.
Yeah, I wrote this down just to do a even more meta podcasting. I was listening to Duncan Trussell. He talks to he would go on like these. Oh, that's gone. He would go on these retreats with like the Ram Dass retreats and do podcasts. And Raghu Marcus has this quote from some other dude that he quoted that's basically says, the God, the guru, and the self are one. They're all the same thing.
Because you're the only one that can take you on the journey to God, and then usually the journey to God leads you to finding out that you are God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Isn't
then
that
that's what that is. That's the Son, the Ghost, and the Holy Spirit. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
I actually talk about that in the Divinity Delusion. The Holy Spirit is the ideal that hasn't manifested yet. That's what that is. It is the pathway to God.
What? Say that again?
So the people like always get confused, and there's like, I guess, big debates in Christianity, or I think it's only Christianity actually, but about what the Holy Spirit is. Because there's the Son, which is Jesus, God, which is God, and the Holy Spirit. And people are like, what the fuck is the Holy Spirit? And if you think about God as an ideal, and not just, so we have to think of ourselves in the subjective, but also the objective, right? We have a duality to our nature. There is the everything in which we find ourselves in, and then there is also, I would say, the asymptote of the divine, which is us. We are the point of God that which the rest of God surrounds. We are the reason we are the asymptote of the divine is because we are the subjective experience of the divine.
How would you say this in a way that somebody who will just like turn off listening to you once they
How do
hear the
you
word
get
God?
them like, oh,
Like, how would you explain this to me if I was the kind of person who, like, as soon as you said the word God or like Christianity, I just stopped listening?
so I would say,
Just as like a little like experiment.
I would say religious terms are useful because they drive the archetypic, like they allow for the concept of the archetype to be created, right? So religious terms are there because they're so useful in, ascertaining this idea that we are trying to discuss.
Yeah.
Right? So if I was to say this to someone, I would always say with a preface, this is not religious. This has nothing to do with religions. However, I believe that a lot of religions are just philosophies. And you can also say this for almost all philosophies. We're all sort of pointing towards the same thing. This concept, this archetype of whatever we came from. So we can all agree that there's something that we all came from. Maybe that something is technically a nothing, right? But there is the void from which all things spontaneously emit. And this void will emit everything eventually in any capacity. And this is not something that's in religion. This is something, it's discussed in religion, but with different terms. But this is something that's very, easily represented in science. If anything, it's the pinnacle of science, is trying to understand what the fuck the Big Bang is, and if that is even the beginning of all things, or if there's something that we are emerging out of, or if it's this fractal structure. But regardless, for anything to exist, it has to have the space to exist. And now, for something that creates space, that's kind of a confusing concept. So there has to be something even more inherent than space, from which space came, right? Space and time. At least, with contemporary physics growing the way they are, time is becoming a less relevant descriptor of our experience. It's just it might be just an artifact of consciousness. But regardless, that's how I would preface it. I'd say this. So when I use the words, I like using divine because you don't say God. I feel like God is too deeply tied into people's psyche as this big bearded white guy sitting in clouds.
Divine is still it's still kind of like the same thing. Like, what does divine mean?
It points towards something that is omnipotent.
Yeah.
And omnipotence is perhaps the end result of the void. It is all things occurring at once. So that's the divine. Is this omnipotent thing that is just all things. And that's why it's omnipotent. It knows all things because it is all things. And it's all things happening at once. Right? And then there's the void, which all of those things came from. And I think what actually is happening, if I was to describe it even more deeply and like kind of flesh it out, is there is this divine thing, which you can call, I would say source is actually the void. But as I explain this more, I think you can just use source for both. I think we are looking at a fundamental duality. Everything and nothing. And I like to create this concept of a light switch in my mind when I bring this up, where you could just think of the off position of the light switch being nothing and the on position being everything. And what I think is happening is we are in a state where we are flickering between everything and nothing. That the spontaneous void is just creating everything all at once. Because if there's no time, everything has to exist all at once, right? And that's what, physics is starting to determine. So whatever everything can be, that all exists all at the same time. Now, if consciousness is a part of that thing, which it seems to be, because we are conscious as far as we are concerned, then maybe there's levels to that consciousness, or maybe there is the amalgamation of all consciousnesses within that thing, which you could call a god, a divine. Whatever it is, and it's purely omnipotent. I don't think it actually cares. I think it's just a thing that exists. And then there's nothing, which is where it dissolves back into, where it's flickering. And the reason I use the analogy of the light switch is not just because it's good to think of like the fundamental darkness and brightness of everything and nothing, but because of, I think it's a Riemann sum, and basically, if you were to flip a light switch on and off for 1 minute, an infinite number of times within that minute, right? So each flip, you flip it faster and faster. That's how you would do that. But at the end of a minute, you have to be done. But it's an infinite number of times, like if you could flip it fast enough, right? And basically, what they do is when you take this sum, you find out that it's 1/2.
I totally lost you on that.
So yeah,
I get
when you take the Riemann sum, so you're flickering everything and nothing on and off, and if you do that an infinite number of times within the span of a minute, the question is to determine what position the light switch is on at the end of that minute, right? Is it off or is it on when the minute is up? And the answer is 1/2.
That's such a fucked up question already.
Yeah, but it's mathematically
At the
provable.
end of a minute.
You flipped it an infinite number of times.
Okay, that's such a weird way of putting it.
Yeah,
That's so odd.
and so I think you have the objective experience, which is the on and off positions. Those are the most objective states of reality. And I think the subjective position is the halfway point, and I think that's where you derive consciousness. That's where things exist, not in entirety and not in, you know, complete absence, but in a sort of general perperpetuity.
Yeah.
I just wanted to use the word perpetuity.
Yeah,
I don't know if that really fit there.
But
But
dude, I just like, all I can think is like, I wonder what there's gonna be so many people that would listen to this and just be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Oh, yeah.
You know? Like, I wonder what language you could use to speak to those people. Like, because I just like have
pictures.
Yeah.
If you could make a good enough illustration, it would make sense. I think that's what...
Like movies or songs.
Or song. Well, the reason I say pictures, I mean, some people aren't visual. But actually, I was having this conversation a little bit today with my cousin. We were talking about how there's like a substrate in art, in all art. And then we were talking about there's like specific qualities that even translate to life and death. And so, like, for example, God, I can't... There's things that are communicable between all forms of art. Practice, certain skill sets, whatever it is, they're mostly communicable between all parts of art. And you'd call that the substrate, which connects all of the disciplines of art.
Yeah.
Right? And then you look at the substrate, and so basically that's the truest form. That's where the truth is in the substrate. If you do all the things in the substrate, you're in perfect alignment with becoming successful in whatever art endeavor you want to go into. And the weird thing about that is it's also, there's certain parts of that substrate that are communicable to how you live your life and how you view death. Especially when you realize that living life is an art in a lot of ways. Especially if you want to live towards your ideals. So an ideal life is very much an artful expression. And...
Oh, fuck, dude. I'm so stoned right now. This is blowing my mind.
Yeah?
This is blowing my fucking mind.
Does it sound good? Do you like the concept?
Yeah, it's just like, it's like clicking, like...
Putting pieces together?
It's putting pieces together in my head, yeah.
Well, what was super weird about it that I thought is, why would something that works as a substrate for art also be a substrate, or also be, present in the nature of life and death, right? And I kind of realized, like, it's because there is no difference between art, life, death. It's all art. Everything is art. Everything's play.
Yeah. Yeah. Alan Watts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And my grandpa.
And my grandpa. And yeah, dude. And
like, yeah, a lot of like the hippie generation, like that kind of era of like that weird wave of energy that passed through in like the 60s and 70s.
And the echoes are still like resonant in the minds of today, which is even crazier, right? Yeah. There's things that weren't recorded in the past, but were said word by word to people for human history to, mull around in their heads over time. And a lot of people are like, well, you lose information when that happens, and you lose specifics. It's like, sure, but
it's like deeper than that.
And what is deeper than that?
Well,
what is deeper than specifics besides generalizations? Like, it's archetypes.
Like Alan Watts in the 60s was like when that idea finally came about. Like, no, motherfucker, that idea has been around since the dawn of time. It's just like it's like weird. Our culture like discovered it. Like we forgot about it because like that's what humans do.
Think about this: all ideas will manifest themselves given enough time. And then think about what, Terence McKenna says when he says, the things that you desire and the time that it takes to get them is collapsing. So the moment you think of something, as that in the time for it to happen, as that shrinks, not only is, in my opinion, you're approaching what you would consider the divine in terms of spirit or whatever psyche, but you're also generating all concepts in a way. Imagine if you could go into a VR space and it read your thoughts and it would just make that thing.
Yeah.
Then imagine that that's just reality.
Yeah.
And then think about why it's so important to have faith in ideals, because how damning would it be to create hell every day?
Well, it's almost like, yeah, it's essential.
Because what if you're just terrified of this space, but everything you think manifests in the space? So if you're constantly living your life terrified, you're just manifesting terrifying things, right? And I think there's an auxiliary sort of concept there where we project so much of our inner psyche out into the world, and then it reflects itself, because typically negative things react with negative things. And so if you feel negative and you feel terrified, you're actually probably more likely to orient yourself towards different types of hell. You're either going to drive yourself into whatever you're terrified of, you're going to seek it out because you want to eliminate it, but you're not actively trying to eliminate it, right? You're just seeking it out so you can avoid it. Eliminate the need to be worried of it, I guess. And then, on the other hand, if I can keep my thoughts together because I'm so high.
Yeah.
But, on the other hand, you could drive yourself into another hell in which protecting yourself from the thing eliminates any possibility for you to have happiness in your life, right? That's what anxiety is. You start getting social anxiety and you just can't even go into a grocery store. What the fuck is that? That's you manifesting hell into your reality.
Huh. Fun.
Yeah. So now imagine being a god. And maybe this is why we're in these states, if there is like a true God state, right? Because this might be the training that a god has to go through to be able to make its own reality, a good one.
Yeah. Well, it's so fucking bizarre.
It is, right? Because it's like, where does the body end?
Yeah.
And God begin? And is God within? Amen. I said, where does the body
then he
end?
walketh into the field and looketh out upon the beautiful
Grain.
Yeah.
And that's when he knew. And all words came to him. He who stood in the grain. I am.
Yeah.
Grain.
I am.
I am the grain. I am corn, man.
Shit.
He just like rips off some corn and starts beating his shit. I am corn, man. It's like, no, you're supposed to say I am God. No, I'm corn, man. Imagine if a god just became corn, man. That's a scary
I
place.
feel like it's so hard for people to accept that, and not only because of what it means for like all the decisions that you like make throughout your day, I guess, but also like, are you even capable of really grasping that? Like, even though I like get
Well, you
something,
are that.
you
So if it's
know-
true, you are that. And there's nothing really to grasp other than there's nothing. I mean, that's like the most Buddhist thing you could say. You know? There's nothing to grasp because there isn't anything at all. You could have the subjective, but that's a temporary place. It's fleeting. You can't actually hold on to it. So quite literally, there is nothing you can grasp. So why even bother? Just go with it. And this is the other. I was listening to Duncan Trussell talk, and this is another thought I had that I was like, holy fuck. If that's the case, that makes so much sense. Like, I think if you're looking to going into enlightenment, one of the hardest things you do is you look about all these people and you're like, man, these people are fucking enlightened. How am I supposed to be enlightened in a non-enlightened world? Like, how the fuck? And then I thought to myself, everything around you is God. Who are you to say it's not enlightened? And so now imagine for a minute that everyone and everything is enlightened. Yeah. And you are the only one that's not joining the party yet.
Yeah.
And that's why you're here. You're not in the fucking party. And then, but you have fleeting moments where you're like, oh, the party. And then you're not in the party. Oh, the party. Oh. Wait. What do I have to do fucking tomorrow with the cat? You know? But that's also just a part of it.
The cat?
But that's a part of it, you know? It's like accepting the monotony and the mundane because you realize that it is an infinite fucking spectrum within itself.
Well, and then there's also within that, like, the practice of realizing that, like, even the most mundane things can be filled with, you know, something. Whether, like, even boredom's going to eventually bring about, like, something interesting, you know?
Well, you know what's
so just happens.
Beautiful about boredom? Is it's the only thing that allows the space for things to happen.
Yeah.
And I think people don't... Here's the thing, is if you focus on the boredom, right?
Ah, fuck, dude.
If you focus on the boredom, you are... It's kind of like looking at a particle. It just collapses into this moment where you're just like, there's nothing to do. I'm focusing on the board. But if you just let the boredom be, all of a sudden you give it the space to propagate all things. That's why when you're hanging out with friends and you're having a good laugh, things just happen spontaneously. And it's not because, oh, we're having a good time. It's, I think we're all infinitely bored.
Yeah.
And then we just forget that we're bored, and then that's what a good time is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fun.
But when you focus on, I don't have anything to fucking do, I wish I had this, I wish I had that, you're just focusing on the boredom. The minute you let that go, you clear your head, and then things can start happening again. And that's because your psyche is fixated on something it doesn't have. Entertainment, whatever it is. But instead of creating entertainment, it just fixates on not having it. Boredom is just the fixation on not.
Yeah.
On the not.
Yeah.
You know? But the cool thing about boredom is it is just like the void, just like the emptiness that the Buddhists talk about. And it's where all things come from. It just can't be looked at. You just keep staring at it, it's going to collapse like a particle, and you're just going to have that thing. And usually that thing is the thing that you can't have because you're bored.
I'll say sometimes it's nice to just fucking sit there and just do nothing.
Yeah, but then at what point are you actually bored? Because when you sit there and do nothing, if you don't call that boredom, then it's just relaxation.
Fuck. Yeah, that's true.
It's weird, right? Like we're I mean, I don't even know if suffering is the purest state. And I guess boredom is the most fundamental suffering. But the reason it's suffering is because you're not giving anything else the space to happen. But the cool thing about boredom is, guess what? It's also impermanent. So no matter how hard you try to be bored, no matter how fucking hard you focus on being bored, you're going to not be able to hold on to that.
Dude, that's like one of the, fuck. I hate talking about this shit, honestly. It's just so fucking, it makes me feel cringe.
Why?
I don't know.
What, like Buddhism and shit?
Yeah, just the fact that I think all this is interesting.
What? What's wrong with that?
Nah, just the fact that like we're doing a podcast about this and it's like super fun, but I'm like, it's also super gay.
Why do you think it's gay?
I don't know. Anyways, I'll not say that. So I'm reading the autobiography / biography of the Maynard James Keenan. He was like he just named himself Maynard. That's not even really his real name. He just like he was just like drawing characters in like the like spines of like journals and shit. And then like years later, he was like, "Oh, I guess that was me." Like he was like, it was like this character named Maynard. He would draw characters all the time, and then I guess like at a certain point, he just like took it on. Like he just like decided that was like
his identity,
his persona or something. But anyways, he talks about going to his like one of his friends moved to Boston, and he went to the military for whatever fucking reason. He didn't even want to, but he just did it to like prove something, I guess. And then he moved to Boston like to meet up with his friend, and apparently his friend's like plan was just to like get a job and do nothing. Like the whole point is just to be fucking bored and just to like you have to go out to a different place, or like you have to go somewhere to allow space outside of your regular routine for
creativity
for like different paths to be crossed. Like it's essentially like relocating yourself within the universe and like the people that you're able to run into and like have experiences with. And like their whole point was like it's the journey into like nothing. It's the journey into like there's no plan, there's no goal. The goal is to have no goal. Like the plan is to make sure that we never plan anything. But like, you know, you have to plan. You have to do something. Like right now, like we're gonna keep doing this podcast because that's what, like, or at least for however long we do it. But like we're not planning this so much as like a long, like a in the future thing. Like we're planning it right now.
Yeah, we just said, "Hey, are you coming over tonight?"
And it was like we're kind of planning it like seconds into the future. And at some point we're going to plan to like do something else. But the plan is like to have no plan. Because the plan like generates itself. You know, but they were also doing it like within a totally different context than like where they grew up and their like their regular routines and stuff. So, but like they're basically experimenting with synchronicity or like that idea, anyways.
Yeah, and I think I would just actually start listening to some more Carl Jung about
this shit scares me, dude.
Synchronicity.
I read his autobiography and I got like
chills
85% of the way through with it. And then I just stopped. Like something in me just was like, I can't handle this anymore. And
what was so hard about it?
It just was like too revealing
about what?
Yourself.
Oh, it's like peering into yourself.
It's just a lot of like information that like can like cut you super deep if you're not ready for it.
Well, the psyche is not a safe place, but in a way, it's the safest place because we don't go anywhere else. That's actually an interesting thing, right? The only place you exist is in your head. If you exist at all. Even if you do have sensory organs and there's an external reality, you don't necessarily even have contact with it, aside from the simulation that you're running in your brain. Or, if there's not even a simulation running in your brain, then you're just the divine eye peering through its subjective experience. Then there really is no you whatsoever. And You're just basically rewatching a memory of what what it is to be a thing like that.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Yeah.
That's yeah. It is. I mean, yeah.
I don't know if I had a
You
point with
can
that.
sort of like use that idea to get your way through life. And I guess that's probably what, like, going back to faith, like, that's not necessarily like the end all be all idea. Is like there's this, you're just like a memory, you're just watching a memory of yourself, but like
I like to say
if that helps you apply some, like, helps, if it's if you can use that in your life to like move forward in the right direction, then that's just as like it's a part of that thing called faith. Like you're essentially like trusting that that idea is gonna like play
sure,
out,
but you should
like
still
serve you.
challenge it, right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
I think
you
it's
shouldn't
I don't
accept it on
think
good word.
faith
I
in
guess.
ideas and concepts, it might be dangerous. But what I don't think is dangerous is faith in ideals. So when by ideals, I don't mean ideas, but I mean the type of person you want to be, the person that you want to create. Whatever your inner potential is that you wish to unlock,
Huh.
I think that's where faith is
Well, isn't that like what
the
they
most
say?
useful.
Like ideology is like fascism is an ideology, right? Like, I mean, because it's also an idea. Like they're kind of, I don't even know the difference between the two, honestly. Like having an ideal and an idea, I think, like you'd have to explain what the difference is. It's like the same fucking word.
I guess I'm saying one in one way it's more of a goal.
Yeah.
An idea is just a concept, and then a goal is like something to work towards.
Yeah.
I would say it's a position of orientation. So it's a path in which you want to walk is an ideal. And now an idea is just, you could say, a step on that path. Or it's just the place in which you walk. You know, it's just it is the ground, is the idea. Or ideas make up the ground. And an ideal is the path through which you travel through ideas.
I
Does that
feel
make
like
sense?
I'm coming down from like a mushroom trip. I just got way too stoned. Oh my god.
Does that make sense, though?
I was totally zoned out, dude. I'm like, I feel like I'm coming, like I just have like a challenging few minutes.
That's
like
good.
The last like 20 minutes I was just shaking.
You know what that is, though? That's like, that weed's strong, though, for real.
The weed and this conversation, yeah.
It's like, yeah, because it can take you in places of your psyche that you're perhaps not prepared to enter. That's why the landscape of the mind is so, it's so dangerous. But it's beautiful. Like, that was my point earlier, is like, it's beautiful because it really is safe in the end, because you're just whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
But
like
it's also scary to be the subjective experience of that thing. At least it can be.
Yeah. Like bringing in the concept of danger is like, I don't know. It's a weird.
Here's what I think about the ideal thing, though, is I think if it is true that there is some aspect of the divine peering through you, and that's what is seeing your thoughts, the observer, right? The objective observer of all your thoughts, who you are, I would consider that the divine. Some people call it the spirit, right? Or we can even call it the Holy Ghost. And this thing is reliant on you for its experience, whatever you is. But I don't think you is that thing, but that thing is the only thing that's observing, if that makes sense. So it's a little tricky,
Yeah.
but
That's funny.
I think that we have almost this unique opportunity to provide a beautiful experience to this thing. We almost get to birth God into the world. We are the subjective experience of the divine, right?
Yeah.
And so when it starts becoming whatever we are, it's locked into whatever we know and whatever we become. Yeah. So you get to actually raise the divine within you. You get to raise it like a child. And this is where a lot of healing comes through, is when you start viewing not just the divine as a child that you get to take care of, but yourself.
Yeah.
Because now you have an adult brain, but you can also still see yourself as a child, like, because you were. And in many cases, it wasn't even that long ago.
Time to fucking kick that little kid's ass, bro. I'm tired of you being such a fucking pussy.
Yeah.
Get up off your...
Yeah. There's a bad parent. God's like, oh,
I'm
God,
spanking you tonight, boy.
Yeah. You spank yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, baby, yeah. Fuck me, daddy. But yeah, no, I think there's something that was really sweet. Because when I thought about that, I was like, oh, that's so nice if that's the case. If you just have this little budding entity in you, and it's just this little infant God.
Yeah.
And it gave you it, and it's in control of all things. So it trusted you to take it through life and peer into itself in this way.
Yeah.
And that's really beautiful. And if you realize that, you can you can meditate on that and come back to it when you feel it's necessary, because it will really help you determine what's important.
Right. Yeah, I think I do that a lot. I don't use the same words for it, but yeah, I think that's why I love animals, because they make me think that all the time.
You just take care of them.
They're like a constant...
Relying on you.
They're like, yeah, they're like kind of like a little reminder of, they're like, I don't know, I guess humans are the same way. It's just like our relationships are so much more complex that you get lost in it. But an animal is like, it's close enough to like this thing you can interact with, and like it has some sort of intelligence to a degree that we don't totally understand. But it's like you like, it's very simple to like have a relationship with like a cat or a dog. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily like I don't know how to fucking have a bird as a pet, but I'm sure it's pretty simple.
Pretty sick too.
Wildlife is like, I feel like wildlife is even sort of a similar thing. Like if you ever there's this guy on Instagram who lives up in Alaska or some shit, and he's like has a relationship with like a mama moose and its cubs, and just knows like everything about it. He's like capable of just having birds. Like he's like become so friendly with birds, like feeding them, that they just kind of like come hang out with him. And like that's something you can use it for me anyways. I use that. I've set up a linkage in my brain that like it's like a little reminder of the idea of like the universe being this thing that's like needs to be cared for and like treated, the
way you'd want to be treated.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And isn't it beautiful? Because in my concept, it's the divine. You're peering into the divine, and it's peering back into you, only to realize it's itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty idea.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like this is like a good spot to...
One thing I do want to say, just to wrap it up on the topic of faith, because we opened with that. And I think it'd be cool to close with it. Professional. Full circle. One of the things I really wanted to comment about faith is the importance of discipline, because discipline is faith in motion. And I think that's where people really lose out on the benefits of faith, because you can have faith, but if faith just doesn't happen. And I think faith is an amount of something that you have, not a thing that's just general. And so when you don't have faith in yourself, and this is why discipline is faith in motion, is because when you don't have faith in yourself, you aren't doing the things that you know orient you towards your ideal.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to move towards that ideal is with discipline. And discipline is art. Right? And art is a discipline. And discipline, and for all intents and purposes, is art. It's a means by which you create art. And if you live artfully, then you live with discipline. And if you live with discipline, then you live in faith. And you have so much faith at that point that you know that if you work towards something, it will happen. Yeah. Because you've done it in the past. And that's what's so beautiful about that, is it's literally one of those things, and this is why faith is so impressive. It's just one of those things that's just how it works, and it works in a logical level too. You're not going to get anywhere if you don't put effort in, right? Or you can put effort in, but you don't have the discipline to manage that effort in a way that's pointed towards an ideal. Because a lot of people put effort into everything, a lot of shit, and it's pointing nowhere.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what you call chaos. You know? That's what people, when they're manic, that's what is happening. It's because they realize all of the potential that they have, and it all starts flooding in at once, but they have no higher direction to move it towards. Or they just pick one randomly. I'm going to be the best author of all time, and I'm going to write a book tonight. And then they write half a book in one night. And then they read it the next morning or a week later, and they're like, oh my fucking, how embarrassing. Yeah. Because they're trying to shortcut their way into achieving an ideal, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true on even more subtle levels. Like for me, like I'll spend like a good fucking 3 weeks working on one song that I'm like I feel like this is a good song, you know? And then like by like week 2, I'm just grasping at fucking like threads. Yeah. Like I don't know what to do with it. And like I just become like, yeah, ultimately embarrassed by it, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Like I feel like,
you know why you become embarrassed by it?
You can still occasionally, if you're like, you know, people sometimes they write a fucking book in a day and it's like, it's, you know, not half bad.
Yeah.
Or sometimes a fucking masterpiece, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. I'm sure it's happened.
But you know why I think embarrassment happens?
Huh.
It's either because you did your best and you know you can be better, or you know you didn't do your best and you're not getting better.
Yeah, write that shit down.
Write
that shit down and send it to me, because
like
I need to remember
motivation.
That. Yeah.
You know what else is crazy? I want to go on this word chain because I've been doing this lately and it's very interesting. So, faith is discipline. Discipline is art. Artfully is, you know, truth. Right? And acceptance is, well, let me restart. Faith is discipline. Discipline is art. Art is acceptance. And acceptance is truth. And truth is love. And love is source.
Nice.
Thank you.
Write that shit down, dude.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And it's
you clearly have that, like, sort of.
it's a
memorized
puzzle
anyways.
like that I've figured out in my head. I have like a small little chunk of like the connections between these things.
Yeah.
And not just like the connect, but like logically, I can tell anybody. It's kind of like if you really studied a textbook, like that's how I can talk about it, because it's becoming more and more clear to me how these things are interrelated.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting how important words are, because they allow us to string together concepts or archetypes in our head.
Dude, I need to write more. I'm so fucking bad at
You need to learn more words.
Yeah.
There's words that will just say everything you need to say in one word, and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah, I need to.
And that's why the catharsis of life is man's idiomatic catalyst for death. That's what that means. And now all my philosophies are starting to get tied together around these ideas. It's very fucking interesting.
Yeah.
But with that said, remember to take care of your dick.
Take lots of kratom. Also.
And also kratom.
And take care of your dick, for sure. You got it. You got to do that.
Mm-hmm. Get some kratom
I
oil.
probably should
and rub
maybe
it-
do a little trimming myself here pretty soon.
I trimmed tonight.
Put some nice argan oil on there, and some like I don't know. Maybe you should. I don't know if that's like a thing. Yeah, like no. You put
Argan
like
oil? I put olive oil.
on your dick. Olive oil.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Bitches love it.
Bitches love it. I feel like yeah, you could probably get away with
Say,
that.
hey,
Bitches love it.
I'm cooking up something for you. Put a little bit of olive oil in that bitch.
Yeah, it's just like it's like a reminiscent of it's like a nostalgic scent and flavor when they get down there. They're just like, oh, this reminds me of like good cooking.
You know what blows my mind is how gross we are as creatures.
Yeah.
I mean, we're beautiful to the subjective experience, but objectively, like it fucks with my head a lot when you see like cartoons like Rick and Morty where like two aliens just fuck each other with weird objects, but they're super like turned on by the objects that they have.
Yeah.
Like they're like have like claws that have pussies inside the claw with like tentacles and shit, and then they're like using their tongues to like tongue fuck the claw to inseminate them or whatever. And you're like, they probably find that as erotic or more erotic than we do doing
Yeah,
these
dude,
things
they
that
have,
we
like,
do, and
way
it's
more
fucking
titties.
disgusting.
They have like 10 titties instead of 2.
Like even if like they're super ugly, they're like really into that. Like this
Yeah.
more grotesque, the better.
Right. Well, and
They
that's,
can't
like,
come unless they
it's
get shit on their
grotesque
face.
to us for whatever, but it's like beauty to them in some
Yeah, the
fucked up
highest
way.
form
Yeah.
of beauty is sex. I think that might be true.
But with feces. You're just like
I think
that might
things can be
true.
disgustingly beautiful. I was
Yeah.
listening to Aubrey Marcus talk about this, where he had an ayahuasca trip and he
Motherfuckers is always taking ayahuasca.
well, it took him to a place where he had to get, and he's like he had a blockage, right, where he just felt like he couldn't progress anymore, and it was because he realized the things that he finds disgusting are keeping him from really understanding enlightenment.
Yeah.
Because he's not accepting them. He's not looking at them as truth. He doesn't want them to be there. He's denying them.
That's like exactly. I'm going through that right now. Also, that's like super weird,
Yeah, so you have to, I think it's really important to
coincidental, whatever.
remember there's an objective and subjective self. The objective is just the realization that you can keep in your head that all things are as they is, you know? I'll write that one down too. all things are all things are as is. I don't even know how I said that.
You know what's interesting is like I feel like podcasting has made it so we can talk about famous people like they're our friends.
Yeah.
Like we just so casually bring up
Aubrey Marcus and
four
Duncan
different
Trussell,
like
yeah.
super famous
Joe
people
Rogan.
in our like, and then there's the people who do podcasts like ours who are super shitty, who like make it a rule that to not bring up
other podcasts.
other podcasts or like
Yeah, I feel like that's dumb because it's like they bring up pop culture and podcasts are part of pop culture.
Yeah.
But you're just saying I don't bring up other podcasts. I think comedians do this a lot where they get prissy about what they decide is okay to talk about. And they're like, that's just fucking lame. If you talk about other podcasts on your podcast, that's lame. Right?
Yeah.
So they create these weird standards for themselves and then they gatekeep.
right.
And it's very not chill. I think it's actually problematic.
Shit.
No, but it's funny. I find myself getting overly concerned about what comedians think. Like sometimes I'm like, because I trust and value their opinions so much because I feel like they view things almost more honestly than anybody else.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes you can get lost in the ideal of comedy as a morality structure because certain things sound good and funny, and it's like funny to say that that's what you believe. And then, but then if you do that enough, you actually kind of start believing it.
Yeah.
And you're like, uh-oh.
Dude,
that's fucking bad.
That's one of the scariest fucking things ever is like I think all the time about like people who like, you know, the crazy people who like believe in flat earth and they get sucked into this fucking weird rabbit hole and they become a part of this microcosm of like people who are fucking just weird and have absurd ideas about reality, at least from our perspective and from like 99% of people's perspective. But then I noticed, I keep fucking itching my nose.
It's fine.
I noticed, I'm also the same way. I'm completely absorbed with like, I've been watching Kill Tony nonstop. I don't watch Netflix.
He's watched
I don't watch.
That's interesting.
I don't watch fucking cable. I don't watch. I would like religiously watch Kill Tony,
Yeah.
and before that, it was Your Mom's House.
Yeah.
Like I'll like very rarely I'll like go watch some shit on Netflix or like I'll watch like videos about drumming, but like for like brain dead like I'm just watching this to relax content. Or like just something to listen to while I'm cooking is all comedy. And I said something today when I was moving a piano with Braden, and it made me realize I've done that in a certain way to myself. Like I'm so inundated with like the mindset of a comedian. Which is weird because I've
just sort of adopted it. Yeah.
I've adopted like a lot of their ideals and like just like how they think about the world. Like I said something like super blanket or whatever, and Braden was like, "Yeah, I feel like that's like probably just like maybe in the comedy sphere."
Yeah.
Oh, I was talking about moving to Texas or something. Like everybody's moving from California to Texas.
Yeah.
And that is very true of like comedians, but I think it's also true of pop culture in general because comedy draws culture.
Yeah.
And like especially all the people that love talking shit on like the stereotypical LA.
Well,
like
here's one that I have. For whatever reason, I just believe now that all actresses are fucking insane.
yeah.
I think, yeah, like if you were to ask me, we're just in conversation, yeah, those people are fucking crazy. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, my view of actors, yeah, it's totally changed.
I used to want to be an actor.
Yeah.
And now I'm like,
right.
those people are fucking horrible.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a minute.
Every
Why
time
am I
you-
saying that? I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. I've never been around those people.
Yeah, that's true.
I actually liked a lot of the people that I was with when I was in, drama class. And now you also use their logic because comedians have really fucking good logic. It's good.
Yeah.
Like even if it's not true logic, it can trick your brain into thinking it's true. So it's like it's what it's designed to do. And then if you have the
Right.
best people in the world designing to do that, all of a sudden you just start thinking in these fucking patterns, and you don't realize that you're fucking stupid and it's not your own thought.
Yeah.
Or maybe not stupid, but you're just like not thinking
It's
for
just
yourself.
it's a symptom of like what's going on today. Like where information is so readily available, and we're only capable of handling so much, like physically, let alone mentally. Like you can literally only absorb physically so much content at one
What's
time.
even crazier.
But there's so much more than you'll ever be able to absorb.
Yeah.
You can just totally go into that one, fixate on one thing.
There is too much content. There's a lot of people absorbing things that have nothing to do with comedians, and it blows my mind.
Yeah.
Like drama podcasts or like storytelling podcasts or all this other shit, and like fucking Ryan, whatever his name is, radio guy.
Ryan, I don't fucking know, dude.
Who gives a fuck?
Doesn't matter.
Some radio guy like the housewives
I
and
don't
all that
even
shit.
like music podcasts. Like
Yeah.
I've listened to I think like Corey Wong has a podcast. He's like he's like a really good funk guitarist. And somebody sent me one podcast that he did with the dude from Oingo Boingo, who became like a movie movie score guy.
Yeah.
And like that one podcast probably took me like 2 weeks to listen to.
Because you just didn't care.
Cause I
You're so used to
enjoyed
comedian
it,
stuff.
but like yeah, it's just like
It's that and scientists like Andrew Huberman and Lex Friedman.
yeah, that shit's too dense for me.
You know what I realized,
like yeah,
or what I'm thinking about is when you think about it, the reason we're regurgitating some of these ideas and these concepts is not just because we believe maybe they're true or we've convinced ourselves that they're true or we think it's cool to sound like that, but I think we're actually sort of calling to other people like us, like a signal, like a bat signal.
It's like I was saying, like we talk about these people like they're our friends now. Like we understand a lot of their ideals on a level that
no one else does. But that's why I think we're using like
or that everybody does.
"Woo," to find community.
Like fucking Joe Rogan. Everybody who's like talks about Joe Rogan, like he's his ideal has become so relatable that
that's the funny thing about your ideal self too. Is the more you let go and have faith that as long as you let your discipline carry you through to your goals, it's not like you're even closing off other opportunities. You're pursuing opportunity. You're actually the better you get at certain things, the more you are opening the door for opportunity,
Right.
because you're doing the things that align with the things that you like, hopefully. Because it would be weird to do things that you don't want to do, because that wouldn't necessarily be an ideal for yourself. But
right.
you also by doing that it's the mythos of Hercules. It's the archetype of Hercules. It's the reason we love Hercules so much, or people who in sports do the outrageous things, or people who just really fucking nail it, is because it's not the archetype of Hercules. It's the archetype of the demigod. Although we may never become God in our lifetime as we know it, or I don't know if it would even be possible with like a Neuralink, right? Because you'd still have to eventually become everybody else to be a god, right? You'd have to completely dissolve yourself. But what you can do is approach the ideal of the gods, which is the demigod. That is the mythos, as the archetype of this thing.
I feel
It's
like
the ultimate human potential is to become a demigod. And what we're watching when we see people like Michael Jordan and Joe Rogan. We're watching real life demigods, Hercules.
Yeah.
You know, and
Right.
the reason that's so relatable is because we all have that in us. We all have that drive to become that thing that they've become for themselves.
Oof. Fuck. That's crazy because now it's like you can take it to like sort of like in my head a creepy level.
Like what?
So now, like the Buddha was the only Buddha for like thousands of years. Jesus was the only Jesus for thousands of years. But like Joe Rogan, like there's a lot of people out there that are just like him. And probably there was a lot of people out there just like Jesus. But like Jesus didn't have a podcast. You know?
That's
And-
a funny shirt, dude.
Yeah,
That's
as
a
soon as I
fucking
said
hilarious
it,
shirt.
as soon as I said, it, I was
Jesus
like,
didn't
"Oh, I
have a
should."
podcast.
That's pretty good. But yeah, he's opened up his brain in a way that like so that many people have resonated with. He's essentially like a religious entity in that way. If you
Yeah.
look to him
Well, he's
as
an archetype. He's becoming an archetype,
yeah.
which you could say is a religious entity, because I believe that archetypes are you could relate them to just geometric clusters and shapes, like mathematical structures, not clusters, constellations.
Have you ever
in
heard
our
of this
mind.
guy called like Melchizedek?
No.
Okay. He's like I haven't really looked into it, but it was the guy that inspired Maynard James Keenan to
Oh,
do
really?
a lot of like the tool art. Like the
interesting.
weird like fractal geometry and spiral, like the perfect ratio and all that shit. It was like a lot of it's inspired by this supposedly like super insane, like super out there dude. But he's like it's all based on math, and it's like a description of reality, I guess, but like through geometric figures. Yeah.
Well, when you think about it like that, math is sort of one of the most fundamental archetypes, because they're not only just literal symbols,
Yeah.
but they're literal symbols designed to explain precisely the nature of things.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it almost inherently, we are just some expression of math.
Yeah. Some super fucked
And
up
s-
equation.
And then, like, math is, like, maybe something that always postulates itself into reality. Because it is reality,
Yeah.
fundamentally. It's
Yeah.
and we understand reality through these. That's actually because we use archetypes. That's what symbols are, archetypes. But symbols are the most concrete, solid form of an archetype.
It would be interesting to hear then, provided that that's like true to whatever extent, like what people's ideas are on what specific geometric figures relate to specific, like I wonder what this guy's philosophy is and what
Well, they would look just like us. It's not that there's like a specific figure that, like an octahedron or something that's like floating in higher dimensional space that's controlling us.
well no
It's
but
something that whatever we are, whatever structure we are, we are the shadow of that higher dimensional structure.
yeah right
And we exist in the psyche, though. So we have to kind of walk away from what we understand as physical reality. So we have to look back. We have to look purely at like a conscious structure. So we're looking at. I think we're an amalgamation of archetypes feeding into like a funnel, and that is our persona. That's our personality that is expressed. Right. And I think those archetypes dimensionally scale up until you reach something that is all things.
Yeah.
And then when you scale them down, you get something that is like literally the pinpoint, instantaneous persona of a person, or something that's conscious.
I wonder if that's where like schizophrenia comes from. Is like one essentially like one
That's a part of
like
an
one
archetype.
archetype like breaks off and it becomes its own expression, like separate from the rest
They
of
start
that
discommunicating with each other.
conglomeration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what's actually really interesting, thinking about the brain again, is going back to that Joe Rogan thing. When neurons like something that a neighboring neuron did, they feed it chemicals that make it grow. Right? And so, I mean, it gets more complex with certain circuitries, but generally, neurons that do things that the brain decided was good get bigger. They don't necessarily grow in size, but they get more robust.
Yeah.
And they're more likely to get more stimulation from the brain. So they're more likely to activate again. Now, the interesting thing is when I look at the structure of people and we're sort of nodes in this network, we can consider all of ourselves as like individual neurons. But then when we see one neuron doing things that we like, we feed it with money or whatever, praise, cheers.
Sure.
And to me, that's just super fucking weird.
Yeah.
Because I think about what would that mean? Because like, look at how powerful Joe Rogan can become when he gets this feedback.
Yeah.
Now imagine if there's a set of neurons or a circuitry of ideas or things that you like, and when you do them, imagine giving them as much feedback as you could. You know how good you would become at something, how driven you would become? And you know what? You know what kind of structure we're in that does that? Because here's what's so crazy. Joe Rogan has a set of neurons that he basically was like, this is good for me. I'm going to foster these neurons in my head called comedy, commentating, fighting. And then through his own internal sourcing of energy into these concepts and ideas that he brought into these manifestations of things that people like, he got even more feedback to those neurons. The people feeding him money and praise are also other neurons that are outside of his own system saying, fuck, we like that. Think about that for a second. You have neurons that aren't even in your nervous system feeding you energy to propagate the growth and strengthen the connections of the neurons in your head that are doing the right thing. And think about what neurons on the outside of you are, from what we've been talking about. That's the divine. And it's almost like if you start going towards your ideal, holy fuck, the divine's going to carry you. And how do you go towards your ideal? You use discipline. And what is the nature of the divine carrying you other than faith?
And what is faith? How do you describe that?
Faith is the divine giving you the motivation to continue and the safety net to fall back on as you pursue your ideal. You know what I'm saying?
I thought faith was art. Wait, what's the equation?
So faith is discipline. So faith in motion, discipline. Yeah, faith in motion is discipline, because faith can exist, but if nothing is happening, you'll have very little of it, and two, it won't manifest itself ever. There's no part of it that becomes reality, so it's kind of stops becoming faith, right?
Yeah.
And so there's faith is discipline. Discipline is art. art is acceptance. Acceptance is truth. Truth is love. And the love is source.
Nice.
And source is you.
Faith is discipline. Discipline is art. Art is
Acceptance.
acceptance. Acceptance is fuck.
Acceptance is love. And love is source.
Oh no, acceptance is truth.
Oh, sorry.
Truth is love.
Well, they all equal each other, so it's okay.
Right, yeah. But it's a good like they carry through to each other
Yeah.
in like an organized way.
And the reason art is acceptance is because acceptance allows the space for things to occur. For example, think of this. When you live in a household and you want to become a better person, but everyone in your household's a fucking asshole. So when you start doing good for yourself, they start bringing you back down to their level because they don't want to, acknowledge their own failings. So they'd rather not have to confront the contrast that you're creating, and that's why they bring you down. So if you're on the same level, they never have to see the contrast, which acts as a mirror towards their own identities.
Yeah.
Right? And we also do this with our friends in general. If our friends behave a certain way, we expect them to stay behaving that certain way. And it's not even like a malicious thing a lot of the time, but it can be a very damaging thing because when we say, oh, I think of Zephyr like this is Zephyr, and Zephyr isn't like that the next day because he wants to be different, I'm limiting your ability to grow. I'm saying, no, you're Zephyr. Like if I was like, why are you doing that, dude? Like, why the fuck would you don't eat fucking ice cream. You never eat ice cream. Why are you eating ice cream? And if it wasn't like a big deal, it wasn't like I thought you were throwing your life away or something, and it didn't matter. It's this weird sort of like aggression almost that like, hey, I don't like that you're fucking switching up on me because it's going to be harder to predict what you do next. Right?
Yeah.
But what that is not, it's the opposite of acceptance.
Right.
Right? And as soon as you give people acceptance, you're no longer pigeonholing them into a position where they can't grow. Once you accept somebody, you can grow. And once you give them space, right? You give them the space to grow. Otherwise, you're just constricting them with your idea of who they are, right? In this, you can do that to yourself as well. And societies can do that. There's a scales to it. Yeah. But once you have acceptance, that's just how they want to be. And you part of acceptance is offering them the space to be, right? To be as they are, and that's truth. You have to what acceptance is allowing truth to happen, because that's what he did. Like if you came in and you said you like ice cream now or whatever, and you did it in the past, and I'm like, no, you don't. Am I not accepting truth? Like that's like I'm like denying reality now.
Yeah.
Like if you actually truly did like ice cream all of a sudden, I'm like, no, you fucking don't. Stop eating ice cream, you fucking moron. That's not who you are. You're not an ice cream eater. It's like, what? I actually like it now. You're just like denying all of reality because you want to keep this image in your head that you don't even know why you care about it so much. If you really sat down and thought, like, do I even care if he eats ice cream? Like, what the fuck do I care? How's that change my relationship? But then once the beautiful thing is you give people acceptance to the space to grow and be true to themselves. Holy fuck. All of a sudden, that's where art comes from, is truth to the self. And how do you get truth to yourself? Before you have to accept yourself. Once you accept yourself, wow, fucking art. And now you can live artfully. And that's why that connection is so beautiful. It's because it's art is acceptance. Acceptance is truth. And then guess what? Acceptance, truth, and love are all the same fucking thing. I would say radical acceptance if I was to clarify it. But
yeah,
it's only radical because it's hard to say and be okay with the nature of reality being as it is, even if it's horrible. That means it could be terrible. And that's just reality. And reality, guess what? That's enlightenment. Enlightenment is just pure truth. And that's why
everyone outside of who you are is enlightened because it's just truth. And you are just an observer of that truth. And so it's up to you whether or not you want to confirm or deny that truth. And that's what thrusts you out of enlightenment, is when you deny reality and you deny God. That's what you're doing. You're denying the existence of the divine as it is. And when you do that, what did Satan do besides defy and deny God? That's why that's there. I mean, there's other subtexts that I think have a lot of important meaning by like the rebellion thing and all that other stuff. I like that genre of interpreting that problem, but I think what it's really there to show is you are this thing that is now denying the existence of God, and that doesn't affect God, that affects you, which does affect God. So it's like, oh, well, you're going to just see this portion of hell forever now.
Yeah. Is it even like you're denying God, or is it like you're denying one part of God?
Well, what's truth, right? Truth is love, and love is source. When you aren't able to accept reality, you're not accepting truth, and therefore you've fallen out of love.
But doesn't that
with
whole
source.
thing flip on itself when you like highlight the fact that even the person who doesn't like who isn't accepting or isn't truth or isn't holding that value in mind is still a part of that value ultimately? Like, even I don't have the...
Okay, so I would say you're I think the problem is, like, when we start talking about this, we think of good and bad, right? Hell is not necessarily a bad place. It's a very uncomfortable place to be. It's a place that's outside of faith. And so it's just hell is the place you put yourself when you don't go towards your ideals. Yeah. And your ideals are your art and your discipline, and that's all acceptance. And it's the reason I say the catharsis of life is man's idiomatic catalyst for death is because we all have our own subjective idiom in this regard. So acceptance is our own subjective acceptance. Because we're the only ones experiencing it anyways. But as long as we feel that we're being truthful to ourselves and we're truthful to what we're being presented with, that's the best that we can do, right? It's impossible to see things exactly as they are. We don't have the capability. There's spectrums of light that you won't see. It doesn't mean you're denying reality. You're just not experiencing it. So that's sort of the goal I would say in this practice would be to learn to accept what is offered to you to accept, which is what's in your wheelhouse to accept, in your capacity.
Okay, I guess it's not necessarily paradoxical so much as it's like, yeah, if for whatever reason your ideals and your truth and your like idea of love is like, you love watching things burn down, you love watching the world go to shit, that's your truth. Like, that's like, those people probably exist.
They're also
right?
enlightened if they're outside of you, because God is truth and everything outside of you is the divine. So the divine has to be enlightened because that's basically just a connection with source. And enlightenment is just the acceptance of truth. And so this is why I think it was so weird to come up with that the Buddhist, I would say Buddhist, there's like a name for the types of teachings that these are, like little insightful ideas.
Koans?
I don't know what they call it.
Or
What did you say?
There's like Zen koans.
Yeah, kind of like that. And it's the idea is live your life like everyone else is enlightened.
Yeah.
Because, like, if everyone else is the divine and everything outside of you is the divine, who are you to say the divine isn't enlightened? Even if they're raping and murdering people, who is to say that that's not a part of the truth?
Right.
Not you, because now you're denying it.
Then you have to, I mean, you don't personally have to reconcile with that reality if you don't want to. You, like, that's like rape and murder is happening over there until it comes your way.
Sure.
But, like, when it does come your way, you have to reconcile with it.
You have to acknowledge the truth of it. And you have to acknowledge the truth that the divine was this. I need to reorganize my structure because this is actually what it is. Faith is discipline. Discipline is art. Art is love. Love is acceptance, and acceptance is truth, and truth is source.
Yeah,
That's
works
more
also.
correct. And
That probably, I feel like that does work better.
yeah, because art is love,
Yeah,
and love
I like that.
is acceptance, radical acceptance with an asterisk, and then acceptance with an asterisk, and then acceptance is truth, and truth is source, because source is all things, and what's more true than all things?
Right. Damn.
And then here's what's even crazier. When you peer into source, you're seeing the flickering of all things and nothing as this simultaneous state that it's in. And for, it might as well be empty or completely full. It doesn't matter. But it is, if anything, it's both those things, empty and full. As above, so below, right?
And everything in between.
That's us.
Right.
That's that half mark. Everything in between. And where was I going with this? That's a half mark. Half a mark. Why is mark in half?
You're saying, like, even if... Oh, fuck, I don't know.
So we're
We're
going
talking
down
about the
chain.
extremities between, like, heaven and hell, essentially.
No, it's not necessarily hell, because the emptiness isn't hell. The emptiness is just the thing that gives space for everything to exist. The emptiness is basically acceptance. And from acceptance is truth. Right? And truth is the divine. So you're teetering between acceptance and truth. Yeah, I don't remember where I was going with that. That's okay.
I think this is, like, a lot to process.
I've been wrestling with it because I'm trying to come up with a better way to even explain all these things, because it's starting, like, I see a kind of a puzzle board slowly fitting together with the archetypes thing, the truth and acceptance, the tools that this actually gives you, the way that it relates to Buddhism so deeply in such a weird way in my mind. And I was gonna say what's really crazy is when you peer into we can call it the abyss or the void, right? The emptiness, the space. Probably better to say the space because it constricts it the least. When we peer into the space or source, and we offer ourselves to be dissolved, and the process of dissolving is acceptance. right? Accepting that you're a part of this thing. Because I was thinking, the reason I'm bringing this up is I was thinking, like, I'm fairly certain that enlightenment is a practice, something that you practice. And I was being very skeptical of anybody who is enlightened, because how can you just be enlightened? It's a practice. How do you stay there, right? And then I thought to myself, well, if you keep putting pieces into, dissolving them into the space, eventually you're going to have no pieces to take back. And then you'll just be the space. And then whatever arises from that source is what you'll become. And that's why I think people can be entirely enlightened. And I think the only way you can do that is by practicing. And so you practice every day, giving a piece of yourself to the void, finding the truth in it over and over and over until there's nothing left to give.
Yeah. It seems like there's like a plateau though.
Why?
Just based on like stories you hear.
That like people just can't get there?
Not that
Enlightenment?
there's like a plateau, I guess, so much as like there's like the most enlightened people are the most enlightened, and like if enlightenment is something that you have to practice, it's you like as a caveat or as a necessity, you'd also would have to say that it's like constantly evolving.
Yeah.
Which means that like the most enlightened people within like the spectrum that humanity is able to be enlightened are at the precipice of human potential. It's not necessarily that that's like the most enlightened, it's just the most enlightened we've gotten to.
Well, I'll say it this way. Everyone besides you is enlightened, right? So when we start talking about what we think of as the most enlightened people, we run into this dilemma of like, you're saying no one else is enlightened. But the thing that I'm trying to get at is that contrast and why we see enlightened people from the subjective perspective is because we ourselves are working towards that fundamental idea.
Yeah.
But to do that, I think we have to accept that everything outside of ourselves is already enlightened. So it doesn't matter what enlightenment looks like. It matters how you think of it to allow yourself to obtain it. And so all of the things that are outside of you have already given all of themselves to the divine from your perspective, because they are the divine. Because the divine is everything that's outside of you. And it doesn't matter what that looks like. What the divine is trying to do is figure out what that looks like for itself. And eventually you're going to give up so much of yourself that you'll become the space. And the space will become the spontaneous thing that creates.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so basically I'm just trying to say, like,
I dig it.
yeah, we can't think of like, oh, this guy's enlightened and that guy's enlightened.
Right, yeah.
But if we were to think about how someone, I think people even,
it's like almost like a pitfall.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like set there intentionally for you to not look further beyond it. Because I would have like, yeah, and there's like stages of understanding enlightenment and what it means. Like for like the longest time.
The best part is
I would assume that enlightenment only pertains to humans, you know? Like
no, I
it's a-
think animals are can be anything. That's,
right. I'm
anything
saying
that's
like
God, right? Anything that's truth.
it like the concept that all things are enlightened is something that's been slowly revealed to me. Like
Yeah.
there was a point in time, probably not even that long ago, where that idea to me was like you know, the
Dumb.
Buddha was enlightened, Jesus was probably enlightened,
And then nothing
and
else.
like maybe there's a couple other human beings out there who are enlightened, and that's the only things in the universe that get that. And like it's maybe only been a year if I'm being
You know
nice
what's
to myself.
even more fucked up is I think we are even possibly enlightened. The only thing that is prevent, because I don't think you become enlightened. I think you already are, but you're just an enlightened being that's not accepting the truth of their enlightenment.
Well,
It's
then
not something that you
like-
become. It's just what you are.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just-
like it's a necessity for you to not accept it.
It's like this inner this is the game.
Like
This is the flipping back and forth.
right.
But eventually you flip back and forth so many times that you just become the thing, or a hyper superposition of enlightenment.
And that's when you die.
Yeah, who cares? All right, that's it for the Ghost Show. Peace of the fuck
Dude, that
out.
was fucking awesome. That was cool.
That was a deep combo.
Well,